What is up? It is Tuesday night. Time for TCR Live. I missed last week. Wasn't feeling great. I appreciate all being patient with that. It's good to be back, and I am joined by popular demand by Troy Honecker. Troy, how are you, dude?
I'm good. Just as our Oktoberfest here in Tempe, so just coming off a busy weekend here. 4 Peaks we put it on, and unfortunately had to watch that Cardinals game in the crowds of Tempe Beach Park, but recovered and I'm glad to be back. Thanks for having me back, man.
Yeah, man. I really enjoyed having you last time, and I was telling you that before we went live, and appreciate you joining and jumping on. We got a couple folks in the chat, Classy Nasty with the tears. That's how we felt, I think, after that game. We got Silver Wolf AZ. Let's go. So it's that time. So why don't we real quick? Let's start with talking about some quick news, some transactions. Talk about what that means for the Cardinals. Oops, wrong side. All right. There are a couple tweets that went out. The Cardinals running back room's banged up, right? In fact, towards the end of the game, the only healthy running back who was active for game day was Benjamin, right? And Cliff Kingsbury talked about that. So the Cardinals signed veteran running back Corey Clement, who had been with the Philadelphia Eagles, I believe, is where I know him most recently from. He might have bounced around elsewhere, to the practice squad. And then they signed Tyson Williams, who had been with Baltimore. Now, it looks like they signed him to the active roster. I know some people were speculating it was the practice squad, but they made 2 moves to make room for the running backs. They released Andre Baccellia, and then they released an offensive lineman. I forget who was from the practice squad. So they had a spot on the active roster and practice squad. So I think it probably checks out that Williams was signed to the active roster. So let's start with, what are your thoughts on what's going on with the running back room and what these signings mean?
Well, I mean, it's kind of obvious that maybe the health of James Conner and Darrell Williams isn't great. I know Cliff said it was just some slight, he says this all the time, it's just a minor thing with Conner, but they want to be careful with him. So maybe it's worse than they thought. Or maybe Darrell Williams, which he went kind of straight to the locker room after an awkward landing. So I think it was a knee injury. I don't know what they reported as. It sounds like he might be a little more serious than James Conner. And also, it's interesting is, I know Corey Clement, I think he's more of like a scat back type. So I think it's also interesting the profile of running backs they might be looking at, more of the third down, the pass catching kind. Because Eno can do both, but he seems to be more of, downfield. He's like a mix between Conner and like the Chase Edmonds, the Thunder and Lightning type. He kind of he does both pretty well. And then obviously Keontae is more of the north and south between the tackle spot type, and I'll be curious what they do with Keontae Ingram. If they do, if you remember Eno's rookie year, I don't think he was a healthy scratch like every game. So I don't know what their comfortability with the rookie running back is, but if anything, these moves are showing that there's some banged up running backs, and one of them might not be coming back as quick as we hoped.
Yeah, Conner fell in that ball, and I think that maybe they were worried about his ribs a little bit or something, but he didn't seem like he was in severe pain. So I think I would, at least at first blush, worry more about the Darrell Williams injury. If it's a knee injury or something like that. There's a reason they had 5 running backs going on the roster, and that part really was because they liked all 5 of them, and usually they keep 3 to 4. So it's working. It's panning out that they kept them and didn't dump any of them, right, and lose any of them. So, yeah, I think this probably, like you said, this tells us there's probably something more going on with the injury, right? That there's probably someone who's going to be out for a while, if not a couple of both of those running backs. Ward's banged up. I think Darren Urban mentioned, or someone mentioned in a tweet, that it also might just be more of a practice move in terms of, like, maybe Keontae is going to be healthy and playing, and and maybe even if they think Conner might be ready by game day, they need guys to practice early in the week and have in case something happens. So for all we know, we might see one of these guys get cut, or we might not see any of them active, or we might see them active. It's hard to know, but it seems like, a lot of Cardinals fans obviously are ASU fans. and our Eno Benjamin fans. So, Eno season is here, right? He's likely to be the number one running back. And I'm intrigued to see Keontae Ingram. I want to, he's been a healthy scratch all year, but I like his potential. So I'm really hopeful that whatever happens, I hope they don't have Tyson Williams active and Keontae Ingram's a healthy scratch, right?
Absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, that's, they have done that situation a couple of times. And I think also, too, I think they're just do not want the situation they had on Sunday where Eno is the last man standing. Even he was cramping up in the second half. Like, even he almost couldn't finish the game. So I think they're just throwing bodies at it just so they can get through another week.
I think you're absolutely right. They don't want to be in that down to one running back situation. Real quick, let me say hey to some of the other folks that have popped in. We got Robert Moore. Good evening, gents. By the way, I have the results of the TCR weekly pick'ems. Just let me know when you want the results. We do a pick'em in the Discord. If anyone wants to get in on that, we just do it for fun. There's a link to the Discord below. In the description, we have a fantasy football chat in the Discord or channel in the Discord. And Robert, let us know the results, and I'll throw them up there. We got Paul G. Good dude. What's going on, Paul? A walking repository of Cardinals history. Thanks for being here. Agent 47, what's up? Appreciate you hanging out. Jason Crow, what is up, dude? Thanks for being here. Nice to see you, bud. Appreciate you. We got Mr. Mono. What's up, guys? Appreciate you being here. Tom Bomb. Insurance move for sure. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So, I don't know how you feel about this, Troy. I'm not really worried about the running back situation. I think they built their running back room to be able to endure this kind of situation. They spend a good bit of money on Connor, but they're not built like, the Tennessee Titans around one dominant running back, right? So, and you've seen how it is in this league. If you can almost plug and play any old guy as long as you've got the right scheme and the right blocking. And they've been pretty good against the run. So I'm not really too worried about that. Is Corey Clement signed? It sounds like he's signed to the practice squad, Paul. That's that's kind of my sense, right? Josh Roth, thanks for being here. Let's go Cardinals. Appreciate you. Jason saying we need to go for edge help bad. Golden has that. I wonder if his foot from that injury is still just bugging him. I don't know. He hasn't played well lately. What do you think?
I mean, I was shocked when he talked, which is so funny because it was that kettlebell incident happened to coincide with his contract situation, and it is magically healed when he got a new contract. So I was curious how he was be able to play because that sounds like it's incredibly painful. Yeah, he has not really lived up to expectations yet. I think, he's missing Chandler Jones a little bit, even if Chandler Jones hasn't even been that great this season, but just having that presence on the other side, it helps out at least with more one-on-one blocking. Hopefully he gets going later in the season. Again, his motor and drive has always been a very valuable asset. But yeah, pass rush has been very lacking. I think we're the last in the NFL in sacks this year, and I don't see much of that changing unless if a massive trade or something happens. But again,
well, along those lines, with Matt Rule being fired in Carolina, everyone's talking about the idea that maybe there is a fire sale going to be happening in Carolina as they look to do a rebuild for the next coach. And Brian Burns has been kind of that name. Now, I think there's been probably more chatter about DJ Moore as a potential trade guy. But in Cardinals circles where we're more interested in maybe a pass rusher, Burns is a name that a lot of fans have talked about. I think I saw a tweet somewhere, that the Eagles were looking at him. He's a guy, I think he's towards the end of his rookie deal, if I'm not mistaken. So he's a guy that might be, if they don't want to pay him a lot of money, maybe they would trade him. I know a lot of fans say let's set a first round pick for him. What are your thoughts on that for Brian Burns?
I mean, he's definitely fantastic. He's the kind of crown jewel of that Panthers defense. Him and JC Horn still looking good as well. It just depends. We could have a nice first round pick next year, depending on the season goes or not. So I'm not sure if I'm willing to part with that quite yet, because that could be a very nice piece for the next 4 to 5 years that could help out immediately, but then again, you have to trust Keim to make that pick, and we all know his track history at the moment. maybe he's due for a good pick. I'm not sure, but I love the idea.
Mhm.
I want to see where we're at closer to the trade deadline, because if Hop comes back and doesn't fix everything like we think he will, then I think I might want to hold on to that pick for next year.
Yeah, it's tough because the first round pick for Browns working out beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have this kind of opinion that Kime can't draft as well as to trade. I'm not as I think the Kime negativity in terms of his drafting has gone so far that it's maybe a little overblown. I know some people might
Mm-hmm.
not like that, but like some of those players, look at some of the players that are starting to develop like now, like
Mm-hmm.
Zach Allen, Byron Murphy, like Isaiah Simmons had a heck of a game. Some of those players that he's drafted who maybe in the past were maybe not bust yet, considered bust, but they were kind of neutral and not really popping, are starting to pop. So I don't know. I feel like the tide's starting to turn, and I do think I think he's a better talent evaluator than people think. I think the problem has been more they played players out of position, or they haven't developed them well in terms of the coaching staff, or maybe they didn't have the right players for the right fit. But so I guess I'm still not in that place. I'm not in that place of don't draft because we can't draft well,
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a fair point. For me, I'd probably rather, man, I just rather see those rookies, Myjai Sanders
Yeah.
out there and Cameron Thomas, rather than trading for an edge rusher who we're going to have to pay. We've already traded for a receiver. We're going to have to pay.
It's kind of like a roster construction philosophical argument. I mean, I think, we're unsure of what Hop's status will be for next year, if he's going to, because he has a huge cap hit, and there's been rumors that Cardinals might be looking to trade him next year. I think, we have JJ Watt's contract winding down. Is he on for next year? Or is that the option next year?
I think it was a 2-year deal, and this is year 2, so they would have to extend him. That's
so, and I don't think they're probably going to extend him. I think we're looking at the replacement in Zach Allen, which is turning out nicely.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess it's, do you want to instantly, have to pay a guy a lot of money going forward, or do you want to, what's this roster going to look like when Kyler's bigger cap hits start happening in the next 2 to 3 years? And where do you want to throw that money? Because also, if Hollywood Brown keeps going, he's going to have a massive deal coming his way. I know the benefit of getting him was he's going to be cost effective for like 2 to 3 years, depending if it's the player option, which if he's working out, let's just say 2 years, because he's going to sit out for a bigger contract. I mean, it's just how it works. But
yeah, right.
So yeah, I'm not in love with getting in bed with another long contract really soon when we have a lot of escalating expenses coming our way.
Yeah, and I think you really make the important point there in terms of roster construction, because whether Cardinals fans like it or not, from what I'm seeing, and tell me if you see this differently, I think what they're trying to do with roster construction is, okay, we're going to spend most of our money on the offense. We're going to trade away for a guy like Hollywood Brown, who we're going to have to pay. We're paying DeAndre Hopkins. We're paying our quarterback. We're gonna focus on the offensive side, and with the defense, we'll pay a few free agents here and there, but we're gonna much more try to build through the draft and value free agents. And I think they're doing that intentionally, because the way this league is now, it's offense first, passing offense first, running offense second, defense third. And defense, if you can build a serviceable defense with budget pieces, then you do that and you build the offense. And as much as, again, some people have been down on Vance Joseph, I think he's actually done a pretty good job with the personnel he's had to work with. I know we struggled at the beginning of the season. We got our teeth kicked in by Kansas City, but Kansas City, a great team. But like, this defense has kept teams like in the 20s and below since, against, and has like contained like guys like Devontae Adams. So like, Vance Joseph has taken this patchwork defense with cornerbacks that we feel suspect about, outside linebackers who aren't getting home yet, but has still managed to build a defense that kept the undefeated team in the NFL to 20 points, right? And if they can get a little healthier, a little better, I think it's going to look more and more like last year's defense that ended up being a top 10 defense with the same kind of patchwork, right? Especially if we can get anything of our outside linebackers, I think we'll start trending towards that. So I actually think if it keeps working the way it's working, that might be the smart move roster construction wise, as much as people might not like it, right?
No, absolutely. I agree with that. I mean, that's definitely where the NFL is going to look at the Chiefs each year. They retool their offense, get it going. I mean, this is kind of a different year for them without, Tyreek Hill, and I think even the Chiefs are showing that their offense is it's very Kelsey heavy. None of the wide receivers are really like Juju's like dropping balls all the time, and the wide receivers don't have that guy. But the running game is actually good this year. They're really good at running the ball, and Travis Kelsey's insane. But yeah, the overarching, it's offense rules the NFL, and if you have a decent defense, you got a shot. Unfortunately for us, our offense has been outperformed by the defense, and we have a very offensive heavy head coach, so that's the confounding part. But
yeah,
you gotta hope.
I mean, that's what's wrong with this season, right? I mean, by and large, like that Kansas City game was going to be a loss with how we play this fine, but like if this offense were even a little bit better, close, they don't even have to be as good as they were first half of last year, but if they were just a little bit closer to what we think they're going to be, this team is probably 3-2, right? Maybe even 4-2, or 4-1. But yeah. So let's hit on one other thing. So there were other players that were tried out, and I want to mention just one player, and someone here, Level 7 mentioned this. Laquan Treadwell is a receiver, former first round pick, was drafted by the Vikings, I believe, who hasn't, he's been kind of a bust, right? But he is a veteran receiver who's an NFL receiver for depth. And, with Tweezy down, looks like he's going to be out for the year, right? They confirmed that he kind of had a setback. Receivers a little bit banged up of a position group. That's a name that they might, they still might consider signing. It's a name to keep an eye on. So, do you have any thoughts on what's going on with receivers?
Does he profile? Is he a taller wide receiver? Is he?
That's a good question. I don't feel like he's like tall, but I feel like he's like around 6 foot, but I'm going to look him up because that's a great question.
Because I know that is the one position with Tweezy down that we are very short at, is big, tall, like the 6'2". AJ Green. Okay. So he profiles kind of like the AJ Green body type, our bigger wide receivers, which we are definitely needing. I think we're seeing it in some of the screen and run game. We don't have very physical wide receivers that can run block or block very well. So he could definitely, I mean, I remember seeing somewhere that we should trade for DJ Chark at the deadline from the Lions, which I wanted him instead of AJ Green, but this is before we signed Hollywood Brown. So I'm like, oh, well, I guess I'd rather have Hollywood Brown. Because I think DJ Chark's kind of underrated, and I thought he would have fit perfectly. And, he's 6'4", he's good, and he played in that terrible Jags team and outperformed. So, but I think, again, we need more bodies in the bigger frame. Kyler likes to throw those contested balls. It's 3rd and 2, it's 3rd and 2, Kyler's taking the one-on-one on the outside, no matter how many times I pull my hair out when he does it. But so we can get a guy to catch those balls, and I'm all for it.
No, I think that's right. And man, DJ Chark would be a great fit. I remember back in the offseason, DJ Chark was a guy I liked and hoped the Cardinals would go after, but I thought he would be out of their price range, based on the skill. So I kind of went with a guy like Auden Tate was a name that I really was hoping they would have signed as that depth guy, but they need that big outside receiver, right? For sure. And Chark, Jameson Williams due back at some point, so maybe Chark might be available. I know Josh Reynolds has played really well for them in Detroit. So between him, they might be willing to, who knows, if they're in a rebuild now still, right? That as much as the hype, from
that faded real fast, didn't it?
Listen, they're a gritty team, and you love that coach and what you see, but they're not ready, so maybe they might be interested to pick up some draft capital. I want to hit on a question. Brandon Orr had a question. Thanks for being here, Brandon. We'll hit on this and we'll get to our next segment. I'd like to hear your opinion on Cliff Kingsbury and if his seat is getting warm. What do you think about that, Troy?
I don't think his seat's getting warm. Again, offseason's been way too chaotic and hectic. You can definitely place some blame there. And at the end of the day, he's got like 5-6 years extension, like 2027, I think, is his contract out. He's got a long time. And Bidwell is not going to be stupid enough to fire him, then have to pay another basically pay 2 head coaches for the next 5 years. He's not going to do that. I think he's definitely underperforming this year so far. Again, when you're billed as the offensive guru and offensive genius, you should be able to get more. And what we're seeing, and again, just the fact we have not scored any points in the first quarter is very alarming and which I'm not going to say it's all on him, because at some point the players have to, take responsibility for that. I still think he's still young. He's still learning. Again, he's had 4 years of NFL experience, when most of these head coaches have, not as head coach, but has been in the professional football league for a long time. I mean, the Shanahans, the McVays, the Mike McDaniels, they all were assistants and been in the system for a very long time before they're head coaches. So again, we're seeing, as we kind of said last time I was on, the Cliff Kingsbury learning bell curve, or, learning curve, as it were. Still a lot of dumb things are happening. Again, we'll talk it later, but that ending sequence of the Eagles was really rough. I think at the end of the day, he needs help, but I don't know why they're not having like any more experienced head, not to be like the head coach or the play caller, but like, because I think even Shanahan had an offensive coordinator, even though he was the offensive coordinator. I still think he had a coach as that, in that position. I'm not sure. Yeah, again, there's just a lot of weirdness kind of going on too between him, Kyler. They seem to get kind of heated at each other lately. I think they're kind of butting heads a bit. Like, he's not great, but you've seen some of the brilliance. You've seen the highs of last year. You just got to keep hoping that, it comes around towards the end. I think we've all been. I think at the beginning of this year, if we all would say we would take a rough start for a great finish, and we're on track for the rough start at the moment. Let's hopefully the great finish comes around.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Yeah, I like, in terms of Cliff on the hot seat, I heard that I think he is the in terms of the betting favorite, he's like the next guy after Rule with the best odds, or the highest odds of being fired. But I don't buy into that. I'm not saying he's not underperforming, but for the reasons you cited, they just signed him to a massive extension. I don't know how much of that they would owe, whether it's all of it or some of it. I think I heard the Panthers, was it 40 million they're on the hook for with Rule or something like that.
Huge.
Yeah. And the Bidwells are not an ownership group that has a major corporation to bankroll the team, right? They own the team. I'm sure they have a few other investments, but it's not like the Kroenke family, right? So they can't bankroll that kind of stuff. So, I would be shocked if Cliff was fired during the season. I would be flabbergasted.
It would take like a nuclear meltdown of like a whole organizational collapse.
Like, literally, it'd have to be a scandal, right?
Yeah.
I think. And at the end of the season, I don't know that they'd fire him even if it's a collapse of a season, because I've said this before. I think it's going to take 2 consecutive losing seasons for Cliff to be fired. I've said that a lot before, and I think that's what it would take. So I don't think he's on the hot seat. He's underperforming, no doubt, right? His play calling, that's a concern. I've been critical of his play calling more this year than I probably have in the past. But I feel like this last game was a little bit better in terms of the play calling than, I think there were some issues, with all those Rondale Moore, gadget plays in the first half. That was a concern, but it got better in the second half, right? Yeah. Right. Those sweep plays are going to get him killed. Like, Rondale's built, he's the best guy for gadget plays in terms of his elusiveness. But if you're doing it, that's the only thing you're doing with it. It's too easy for, the defense to hone in on that. Right. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on Cliff's play calling and on the Rondale Moore stuff?
Yeah, I was going to kind of talk about the Eagles, but his play calling has been, he's just like, we just take too many weird, like, negative consecutive plays, like at bad times. Like, it was like 2nd and 2 or something. He tries to do a sweep or something. Now it's 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 6. And it's like, dude, you just took an easy conversion and now made it way more difficult than it has to be for some cutesy play, like in the middle. Like, it wasn't even like a goal line thing. I mean, again, Bill Simmons is on a thing that like coaches play calling has just been the worst it's ever been. Which if you watch that Bengals Baltimore game, that made me happy. We had Cliff seeing some of the stuff they were doing. I was
Yeah.
losing my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, they're Philly special, and then like try to do the shovel pass thing. All of it stuck. It's like, come on, dude. Yeah, he and Kyler are kind of the same, where they seem to be more of like in the flow guys. Like sometimes when Cliff presses the buttons, he's hitting them. I mean, that Rams away game last year, it was like a work of art. He was pressing all the right buttons, Like again, I think you kind of alluded to on your postseason show from the Eagles game. Yes, love the Rondale screens for the most part weren't hitting, but that 3rd and 16 that converted because it hit right, like
Yeah.
it was beautiful. So
Yeah.
he's like kind of like Kyler in a way that he has to get in a rhythm and get going. But yeah, his play calling has been bad. I think a lot of it too, I think again, we'll kind of talk about is just like personnel isn't, and that's the frustrating thing. It's like the personnel isn't quite matching what he wants to do, but in your head, it's like, then why are we running these plays if we don't have the personnel? Like that's what's frustrating.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And, yeah. And I think this is my take. Cliff needs to stop being too cute. Moore was -7 and 2 carries. Like I think in my opinion, I'm probably more generous than most people. I think like 9 out of 10 of Cliff's play calls are decent to good. It's just that 1 out of 10 where he does that. He tries to be too cute, does a jet sweep on 4th and 1 to Rondale Moore. And that's the stuff that's killing him. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's that, and those are the plays he needs to stop calling or not call as often, or have a better sense of when to call them, set them up better. Right. I mean, because that 3rd and 16, screen pass you referenced that I mentioned in my video, that was a good play call at the right time. And it was a screen pass. That one worked for some reason that these other ones didn't. Right. So yeah, absolutely. Real quick, I want to answer this question. Cattle Dog, I don't know what percent, but he had 67. Simmons was in for 67 snaps. I think the highest was 73. So it's somewhere in the 90-ish percent, maybe.
Yeah.
It was significant, right? He played a lot, so that's good, right? So why don't we use this as a chance to kind of transition to kind of our next kind of point. I think we've talked enough about the game. So what I want to do is go to our Cardinals stock report. We're going to talk about players that are trending up and trending down based on the last week. Players whose stock is up, stock is down from what we saw. Troy, I'm going to let you get us started. Give us your. Why don't we start with the negative so we can end on a positive note? That's right. So who's your first stock down player?
My first stock down it pains me to say, is Mr. Rodney Hudson. He was out, and surprisingly, he wasn't really missed this game. The interior pressure held up really well, I thought, and especially this is probably one of the more ferocious fronts that we were going to face. And I felt like the interior pressure wasn't a major concern, Again, is it an outlier for Sean Harlow? Potentially, but there wasn't a terrible missed snap ball that Rodney always has one a game, it seems like, especially in the most crucial of all situations. So yeah, I think Rodney, and then the fact they have Billy Price now, it's seeming like they are preparing for a future where maybe Rodney Hudson is not going to be there a lot. And judging, he wanted to retire. Turns out he wasn't going to get paid if he did, so he came back. Like it's been a very fractious relationship with Rodney, which has been a real shame because he was supposed to be like one of the major. I mean, he was a major transaction for us last year, but like it's just been just not great in terms of like he does seem like he doesn't want to be here, and it's just like we're pulling teeth to get him to play. It seems like.
Yeah, like it's tough because I'm really cautious about trying to get in the mind of players because I think it's dangerous to try to read body language because humans are notoriously bad at reading body language. Malcolm Gladwell had a great book about that called Talking to Strangers. I highly recommend. I'm really cautious about that. So I say this tentatively, but like, and maybe he's just kind of an aloof dude, but when you hear his interviews, it doesn't feel like he's really sold in. And the fact that he, this preseason, there was that whole thing he was mulling whether to play or not. I don't know. And I also remember back to when he was originally with Kansas City and he was a free agent, and the Cardinals had interest, and he went to the Raiders, right? So there was a reason he kind of, spurned us back then. I don't know what it is. And then we traded for him when he was going to be released. So there's just part of me that wonders, if he wanted to be released so he could go sign with Kansas City, but then they drafted Creed Humphrey. We traded for him, and maybe he never wanted to be here. I know it's speculation. I know I'm usually like, hey, don't speculate like that. I'm not saying that is the case, but you have to wonder is as far as I'll go with that. And the play has, he's good at picking up the blocking, but it's funny because last season, everyone would talk about his PFF grades were always kind of in the 50s and 60s and people, PFF is, PFF is baloney because, BS because Rodney Hudson's graded badly. And he's been grading kind of similar to this year. And then I'm like, I don't know, maybe PFF's kind of got it right. Maybe they've got it right with him, right? Maybe he really isn't. Maybe he's lost that step. He's still picking up the blocks, and maybe that's where he brings value that other guys don't do as well.
He's definitely got the intangible as calling out protections and stuff, and that is always probably the more important part than almost in the blocking is at least getting everyone in the right spot. But I just say that because I found it interesting that we got Billy Price, Sean Harlow played well, and the whole off-season drama. So. And I think also it was interesting in the early draft picks that the that center from Iowa was listed in one of our potential first round picks. He ended up going, I think, before to the Ravens, I believe, Linderbaum.
Yeah, Linderbaum.
And everyone was very confused, why? We have Rodney Hudson, and then the news came out. It's so I think this is almost kind of a long thing coming that we were unaware of. Yeah,
for sure. So. Yeah, no, I think even though he didn't place, well, maybe that's part of what stock down on Rodney Hudson. I buy that for sure. I'm going to stay with the offensive line. And a couple of people are mentioning, Kelvin Beachum, right? And Beachum, Beachum has graded reasonably well this season in kind of 67 or so, but he had a really bad game or a pretty bad game. And, the one sack the Eagles got was Reddick beating him on a power move, and Reddick's not a big guy. You think of him as more of a speed rusher, but he just kind of bulldogged him and just kind of bull rushed him and just kind of beat him. So Calvin Beachum, I know a lot of fans are kind of down on him, and he's a high character guy, but you've got Josh Jones waiting in the wings, and I don't, I just kind of figured next year Josh Jones would be the starting right tackle, but I have to wonder if
it might be coming sooner than later,
Yeah, so that's kind of my first stock down. Any thoughts on that?
No, yeah, I agree, and I think Beachum also looked pretty bad. I think it was in the Rams game. He was getting lit up by who's that guy? Leonard Floyd? Is that the? Not Leonard Floyd. Yeah. So yeah, I agree. He's having a rough season where or the opposite side, I think DJ Humphries is having a great season. It was kind of flip-flop from last year, DJ Humphries is having kind of an okay season, and Beachum was having a great season. But, I mean, it's just that is something that's happening. This line is getting older. Pugh kind of was on his last leg. I mean, this is, I think, Pugh's final year. Beachum is getting older, Rodney Hudson. So I think next year, we know a lot of what the draft or free agency profiles are going to be, because we have a O-line we need to start rebuilding here soon. And I hope Josh Jones gets his time this year. They started him at right guard last year. He started off strong, then struggled badly down the stretch. He looked good in preseason, and I think he graded, pretty high. So I want to see him. And right tackle is his more natural position. I think he's more profiles as a left tackle, but
tackle is more natural for him than guard, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I would love to see him give a shot. I think they're just, I don't know, Kyler's probably more comfortable with Beachum out there.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. They're going to have to figure out some things for the offensive line. And I think move number one is sign Will Hernandez to an extension.
I agree. He's been fantastic so far. And he gives, and just like Ron Wolfley says, he's a dog and he's got that nastiness to him. And when he he got bummed, he got ejected from that Carolina game, but man, when he went straight, when he went up to Louvu or whatever and lit him up, oh, that was beautiful.
No, you want that guy who's got that streak, as long as he doesn't take it too far. And he does seem to be a guy. He doesn't come across as a dirty player. He's you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like he crosses that line. I know he bumped the ref. That's the whole other thing, but yeah. Who's your next stock down?
Stock down. It's more of a group. It's more of the NFC West in general. You know, the Rams are officially, I think, a bad team. They look terrible, which is even more depressing that we lost to them. But Stafford looks miserable. The offensive line's in shambles. Their only offensive weapons, Cooper Kupp, and even then, he's not like a game wrecker. He's a great piece, but he's not taking over games. Their defense is very middling. You know, Ramsey's not quite the elite player he is. I think, you know, Donald will get his 1 or 2 sacks, but other than that, like, they're just not the team. I mean, they paid for the Super Bowl, and now we're seeing, you know, the price. Seattle's been doing good. I think they're overachieving, and I hope they come back down to earth sooner than later. I mean, their defense is miserable.
I think this next week would be a great time to come down to earth, wouldn't it?
Exactly. I agree. So Seattle, I think, is middling. I mean, they're doing better than we thought at the end of the day. We thought they were going to be bottom tier, and they're playing way better than I thought they were. And then the Niners are good. They're a great team. I don't think they're an elite team. I think because our offenses are like projected around the same EPA per play, which that's not a good thing if you're the Niners, because our offense is not doing. I mean, it's trending in the middle of the pack, surprisingly, but they just have an elite defense at the moment, and so I think they're a good team, great team, not an elite team, and so I think, you know, we were touted as, you know, the strongest division in football for a long time, and that's definitely not the case anymore.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, it pains me to see the Rams struggle. Not really. So, you know, Seattle, I'm not shocked that I'm shocked by how well Geno is playing. I'm not shocked that they're feistier than people thought, because that's, as much as people are down on Pete Carroll, that's a well-coached team. They've got a high basement. I didn't think they were going to be like a 3-win team or something. 49ers, to me, they have such a good roster in terms of skill positions and defense. Jimmy G, if he's healthy, is a decent quarterback. I think they're the type of team that can keep going into the playoffs until they reach a Mahomes, Josh Allen type quarterback or Tom Brady. And Jimmy G is going to get outplayed by that quarterback. But they're the kind of team that can put up 12 or 13 wins, be a team that goes in the playoffs. But I just don't see them as a championship team, because at worst, like, they're going to get to the Super Bowl, and Jimmy G's not going to be able to outduel whichever elite quarterbacks on the other side. I want to give Robert more credit. Yeah, in our pick'em, I picked the Rams. I thought they would beat Dallas. I know Dallas has been playing well, even with a backup quarterback. I thought that I didn't think they could keep rolling. So yeah, Robert, you're right. Congratulations.
Yeah, that Dallas D is something fierce.
Yeah. Now Seattle, Rashard Penny has got a broken leg, but they've got that rookie that they drafted who was arguably the best running back. A lot of people thought he was the best running back in the draft.
Walker,
Kenneth Walker. So we'll see. But yeah. So I think you're right. I think NFC West is stocked down, right? Who would have thought the NFC East would be what it is, right?
I know.
My next stock down, and then we'll go to the stock up. A little bit obscure, but I'm going to go with Lecky Fotu. I know some people are saying, well, he's already stocked down. He's actually played pretty solid this year. Not great. Like, I mean, he was a guy who his first year was like PFF grades in the 30s and was really struggling. He got those grades up over 50-ish. And this last game, looking at his grade, let's see. His grade this last game was 34.6. So he had a rough game. I was starting to hope that he would be and he still might be like, just not an elite guy, but a guy solid kind of a depth, and had a rough game. So I know that's a little bit obscure, but that for me was a stock down. And I'll just throw as a bonus, Dennis Gardeck had a rough game. He's been grading in the 80s and 90s all year, and he graded low. So,
I mean, there's it's perfectly exampled by that backbreaking third and like 15, and he was in coverage and just couldn't bring down Goddard. And it's just like, I mean, that's what kind of not single-handedly lost the game for us, but that was kind of the final nail in the coffin in a way, because I know the defense played great in the Eagles game, or played well, but you have to take in that time of possession in the second half was brutal. And so at the end of the day, that does go on the defense. Like, you can't get them off the field. And we only had like 2 or 3 possessions in the whole second half. And so, yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, he'll bounce back. It's Gardeck. He's
got that engine that doesn't stop. Right. So
Mhm.
So who's your first stock up player?
Stock up, as we've referenced him already. It's our man Eno. He's going to be the man this week. Due to he's probably due to his only one left at this point.
Right.
I guess
Battle of attrition.
Yeah, exactly. We don't officially know James Conner's status, but again, due to the moves today, that it's probably not great. Darrell Williams is probably not ready to go, so it's time for Eno. I mean, he's looked great. He had a great touchdown on Sunday. I mean, last year he has one of my favorite touchdowns of the year when he trucked Drake Patrick, in that San Francisco game, which is great. This is his time to shine, and he's wanting it. He's been a player that, like, I think has surprised everyone in the organization, because I guess his rookie year was just terrible. He didn't really seem to have the professionalism, or he didn't know how to be a pro athlete, and I guess he's been getting better and better every year. And until this season, Cliff and Bidwell, there's that clip on the YouTube that they're just blown away by him. So I'm stoked for Eno. I'm excited to see him go full tilt, see what he's got, and then and he's gonna be, it's his time to shine. So it's put up or shut up for him in this scenario.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Eno season, right? He's gonna get that chance, and then Keontae Ingram along with him, right? Hopefully we'll see. He's going to actually have a chance to be active and not a healthy scratch. So that right there is something. So no, I think it's a great call. We've been excited to see what Eno can do. He's played well in limited touches. And now, hopefully, not that we hope for players not to be healthy, but hopefully for he's going to get a chance to, in a little bit more of an expanded role, show what he can do, right? So I think that's a great call.
And this is a good first game for them, because that Seattle defense is really bad, and you can run all over him. So good first one to get out there.
If you got him on your fantasy team, right, consider starting him, right?
Exactly.
So I got to go with, and Paul's mentioning this, man, Isaiah Simmons. With as much as he had been down this year, kind of not, losing those starter snaps mid, kind of couple games in, played majority of the snaps, and to get 13 tackles, and he graded well too. Sometimes you can get a lot of tackles in garbage time or whatever, or rack up tackles, but not necessarily play super well in other areas. But his grade, he was, I think, the highest graded defender, if I'm not mistaken, for the Cardinals. So, man, got to give Isaiah Simmons a stock up, right? So for sure. He's for me the first stock up.
Yeah, and that game plan for the Eagles kind of benefited him, because there was a lot of, we give Cliff a bunch of crap for all the screens, but that was the Eagles' entire game plan, was RPO and screens the entire game, which is unfortunate. Our defense couldn't really stop it, but that plays at his strength, man. Sideline to sideline, he's strong, he's fast, and he hits like a missile. So that's really great. I'm glad he had a great game. A little disappointed Zaven didn't have a better game, but those RPOs are kind of tough, and those linebackers under a lot of stress, a lot of pressure. So I think he had a rough day at the office, but
real
good.
Quick,
we need him to play better.
Mr. Pack says everyone underestimates Seattle's offense. Well, we were talking about we were talking about their defense. So we were talking about running on their defense. So I checked the stats. I would tell you, on defense, they are allowing 430 yards per game, which is dead last. So I think you must have misheard us. We didn't say their offense. In fact, we talked about Geno Smith is playing really well, but their defense, not good. Defense is woof.
Their offense is like top 8 in like every offensive category. They're fantastic.
Yeah. Their offense is doing really well. So no one in here is underestimating their offense, although I think they will come back down to earth a little bit. I don't think Geno's going to play that well all year. 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. But no, their offense is doing fine. It's the defense, right? So yeah, we checked the stats, Mr. PR Mac. We're good. So who's your next stock up on your list?
It's the defensive backs, just kind of as a unit. Again, Byron Murphy's just been stellar this year. AJ Brown only had like two catches the whole game, and he's not the first one that's been put in Byron Murphy jail. Devontae Adams also had a very limited game. Cooper Kupp had a limited game. So the DBs are playing well and they're getting healthier. We're getting and they just got Antonio Hamilton back, who was apparently through camp like their best cornerback according to Cliff. So we're getting healthier. And then also Trayvon Mullen hopefully will be coming back this week or getting some more reps in. So we're getting healthy. We're getting depth that we needed. Byron's been playing great, and Marco is a little rough, but again, at the end of the day, he's a 4th or 5th round draft pick. He's 4th round draft pick. He's not. We're kind of getting what we drafted essentially, but he hasn't been a huge liability. Yeah, AJ had him for a couple catches, but he wasn't burned deep. I'm not cursing Marco Wilson's existence week in and week out. So that's all you could really ask for. Again, a position group that we thought was going to be the major liability of this team is turning out to be one of its more solid position groups.
That's how it was last year, right? Going into the season, everyone was concerned about the cornerback room. And I tweeted out before the season started that I'm like, I think this cornerback group is going to be better than people think. Not elite, but better, and it was. Until they got a bunch of guys injured and they were starting guys off the street, but that's going to decimate any quarterback room. And it seems to be that way this year. Even when the defense was struggling earlier in the year, it wasn't receivers that were torching us. It was tight ends. And that's more, safeties and middle linebackers. The middle linebackers in particular were struggling, right? It's interesting. Like, Marco gets beat on the underneath routes, right? Zone beaters. Marco doesn't get beat. The scheme does, and here, the thing about Marco is it's interesting because his PFF grades are pretty bad. They're like in the 30s and 40s, and he does get beat. Like in the first half or the first quarter of the Philadelphia game, like they were picking on him, right? They just kept going at AJ Brown, and like picking on Marco, and that he kept getting beat. But for as much as his grades are bad and at points he gets beat up, like I think it's the scheme probably covers for it, and maybe having those really good safeties, like the best safety tandem in the league for my money, is helping them out. But like they're just not getting torched by receivers, right? They're getting it done even despite those bad grades. But yeah, I think the corner or the defensive backs as a stock up is right on. Byron Murphy Jr. to me had one of the best games he was good in coverage, but he also was making some really big boy tackles on the outside, right? Tackling like a safety. It was nice to see. Antonio Hamilton, just by virtue of being on the field, was a stock up, right? The fact he's healthy, played 16 snaps. Jalen Thompson is a guy that we all love around these parts, but like his PFF grades were a little bit low in the 50s, and he had a pretty good game. So he even played better, this game. Buddha had a good game. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right in terms of that. So my next stock up, I'm going to go with Myjai Sanders by virtue of being, again,
active and played.
He didn't have a ton of snaps. I think it was like 8 snaps or something like that. But he played, and he actually graded pretty well in those 8 snaps. So it's nice to see him playing. So that was a plus, right?
Kim Thomas had like 10 snaps too, right?
Yeah, Thomas had something like that. He was active, and I think he had a few more snaps than Myjai. So it was nice to see them both healthy, right? Real quick, let me just say hey to, I know a bunch of folks have jumped in here, and I haven't had a chance to say hey to everyone. Thank you all for being here. Really do appreciate that. Calvin's dropping in. Any update on Prater? What I heard is they were going to have him work out this week, later in the week, and kind of decide where he was at health-wise. Have you heard anything other than that, Calvin? I mean, Troy. I got you right when you're taking a drink.
I know. Wednesday they're drinking water.
Yes.
Wednesday he's going to work out. See how he feels. I don't know if they're cutting Amendola or not. I think they're waiting to see how Prater feels.
Right. They're going to wait. Right. Yeah. Man around town, my friend Kevin, thanks for being in here. Get those likes up. Love the show. Show the love. Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate that. We got Aiko Ishiro. I hope I didn't butcher that. Aiko Ishiro. I wonder why our defense are so soft and short yardage. They're usually better at that, right? Last year at least they were. So I don't know. I mean, Jalen Hurts just kept getting all those those quarterback sneak first downs and stuff. So.
I know that was just one of the most painful games to watch. We really think about it. It's just so helpless. Like, and here we go.
Yeah, right, for sure. All right, so I had my Jai Sanders. Who's your next stock up?
Our favorite screen catcher, Mr. Rondale Moore. I think he's actually stock up because he got downfield, and when he did catch a ball, he looked great. He got some yak. He was fantastic. And I think a good stat we're seeing is his route participation, which is like I feel like every year there's a new advanced metric stat that's now becoming very important. And route participation, I think, is at least in the fantasy realm, is definitely important. So Rondale Moore's route participation is up. He's running some routes, a lot of routes, and I think hopefully Cliff will get the message that he is very effective downfield. I mean, he's really good at the underneath stuff too. Like, I mean, I remember that Rams game, again, the away game, he caught one underneath and took it for 15, 16 yards. He's so good at getting the 1 or 2, 3 extra yards that you didn't think was possible. Like, I love him. So yeah, Rondale Moore, stock up. And I don't know if he will fix everything, but the idea of Hop, Hollywood, and Rondale Moore all at the field at once is very enticing.
I agree. I mean, I'm a big fan of Moore's talent. I've been since they drafted him. The injuries have been the biggest issue for him, and it was going back to college. So that's the biggest knock. In this game, the usage of him in the first half was rough. Like we talked about, he's good in those screens if that's not the only thing you do. But he had that nice catch and run for 28 yards, right? And then he had we talked about a couple times that screen for 16, and so they're throwing it to him a little bit beyond the line of scrimmage, which is nice to see. And yeah, he looked really good once they got him going. So I think that's a good call. I'm gonna stick with someone also on the receiving core, going with another kind of under the radar guy, a guy who the Cardinals fans have been really down on, who actually had a solid game, and that's AJ Green. He didn't put up big numbers, but he made a couple really important third down catches, right? That got them first downs when they really needed it. A couple really clutch catches. Again, they don't look big in, the box score, but when you watch it, like that one when he was leaning or coming out of bounds, kept his feet in, that got them a first down. He had a couple of big catches like that. So, I thought I know a lot of people, again, AJ Green, he, with the whole thing in Green Bay last year, and he struggled this year. People just want him cut. AJ Green is a great guy to have for those kinds of if he's your fourth receiver and you're not necessarily needing him to do a ton of big plays, but once in a while he gets you that big boy catch with guys on, kind of trying to tackle him and uses his size, converts those tough plays. Like, that's what he can still do well, right? So if you use him as a possession receiver for those situations, that's great. So I think that what we saw was at this point in his career a really great usage of him. Now, if we can get again Hopkins back and then we have him more and Hollywood, then I think that's a great situation. So I thought Green in limited touches had a nice game.
No, I mean, it's not a coincidence. Like, Kyler loves throwing the contested ball to him. There's a reason why, because he's good at it. I mean, I know when he's a little bit long in the tooth, it becomes unbearable to watch. But again, in short doses, and if it's 3rd and 2, Kyler's doing the one-on-one to AJ Green, and it drives me crazy. But no, I totally agree. Actually, I think I had that in my notes originally. But yeah, I thought he had a good game. Again, he was one of our best wide receivers at the beginning of last season. So if we can get good AJ down the stretch, I'm totally down for that.
Yeah, for sure. Real quick, couple comments and questions. Wesley being out for the year irritates me. I like Tweez a lot. I thought he'd slowly take over AJ's. Yeah, I think we're all disappointed. He had some nice games down the stretch last year. I think we were all hoping to see more of him, especially with, Hopkins out. We thought, okay, Tweezy might be more in the mix, and then he got banged up. So I think we're all kind of disappointed by that. Great point. PR Mac, no offense, pun not intended. But what does it say about the offense that we have to wait for D-Hop? Listen, that's a valid question because this offense struggled when D-Hop went out last year. We don't have him right now, and we're struggling. And, yes, if when he gets back here, if this offense all of a sudden starts humming, what it says is, well, one, it says Hopkins is a hell of a player, among other things. But, that is, you would like to see this offense be able to get things going without Hopkins, right? And then be better with him, but at least competent without him. It's tough though, because like in stretches, they do look good. In the second half of games, they've been really good, but obviously it's those slow starts. So yeah, and I think that's an interesting point. I hadn't really thought about it, but like, I would really like to see us get some good performances in these, in week 6, right, against Seattle. Really a good performance, like from start to finish. Now that with that Seattle defense, maybe it's a little bit of fool's gold, but I'd like to see them put together a game and show offensively they can do it without Hopkins from start to finish. But yeah, that's a fair concern. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I just had the same line of thinking. Because remember in my head, I was like, I really hope like we'll see the next evolution of Cliff this first 6 weeks without Hop, because that's what we need to see. And last year we saw glimpses of it, and with all the Colt McCoy games, minus the Panthers one, which is brutal. I think the Dallas game, we've seen Cliff had some good game plans and some good play calling games, and the offense looked decent without Hopkins before. Unfortunately, we haven't really seen it yet this year, which is, I think there's some other outside factors maybe coming in. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's not encouraging that we're struggling as much without Hop, because like I kind of alluded to earlier, Hopkins might not be here next year. They might trade him away, or his contract's coming sooner than later, winding down sooner than later. And unfortunately, DeAndre Hopkins don't grow on trees. So I don't know what Cliff's plan is going to be when he's not around. But you also have to think, too, at the end of the day, like a lot of these offensive gurus, they need good players to make this work. I mean, look at Matt LaFleur and the Green Bay Packers now. I think their offense is worse than ours, and they also don't have, they have some great players on that team. So if you don't always, it's a little harsh on Cliff, but I think at the end of the day, what we're seeing is slowly. I mean, there's some other factors that make it unacceptable, not just from the talent that's on the field right now. It's like just preparation and stuff seems to be mind-boggling. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, listen, for as much as the Cardinals' offensive struggle, they are pretty well in the middle of the pack in terms of points scored. Mm-hmm. Right now, that's not, you want to be better than that, but it's not like we're talking about an offense that is Chicago or Houston, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, hey, or the Rams, who are fourth from last, 28th, right? So I think we need to kind of have some perspective here. The offense isn't as good as it showed it could be last year, but it's middling, not faltering. You know what I'm saying? And so that we have to kind of be clear on that. But so that's something to keep in mind. My friend Kevin here, when we get him back, we're gonna be unstoppable. Hello, Super Bowl, right? Keenan says D-Hop might not fix this. Look at 2020 collapse. Or do you mean 2021 collapse? I don't know, or just the 2020 collapse. No, 2020 team
we were bad down the stretch in 2020.
We've been bad down the stretch, I guess, every year. But that 2020 team wasn't as talented, so I don't think that's about D-Hop.
No,
so. But yeah, King Fire Cliff. I know there's a lot of that opinion. Hey, thanks for being here, King 3 J Rock. Austin boy. Chris Sims says that the Cardinals have the most boring spread attack in the league. Maybe. I don't care if it, I like watching exciting games, but I don't care if it's boring, if it's effective. Now it hasn't been effective enough. So I don't care if it's boring. If it's not creative enough and that's hurting its play, that's a whole other thing. But Glenn Flanagan, thanks for being here. Cardinals for Seattle 27-17 market. Okay, as long as it's Cardinals with 27, I like it. Let's see. Tanner Dick saying it was BS. He's yelling BS that they made use of an injury timeout during an incomplete pass when the clock is stopped. official's going to official. I don't know.
It's just one of the we were just destined not to win that game. There's clearly way too many outside forces going against us for us to win that, unfortunately. But yeah, that's like more salt in the wound. And once like I think Darren Irvin or someone tweeted like not to like because I think we all thought JT was like hurt pretty bad. He's like, and the rub salt in the wound. We have to burn our last time out. I'm like, oh no, this is definitely going to come back to haunt us, isn't it? And sure enough.
Yeah, and that's yeah, for sure, and that's a good point. Like if it's an incomplete, maybe they shouldn't have to use injury timeout because as long as you get the playoff by the play clock. But I don't know. Maybe they'll look at the competition committee. I don't know. Yeah, RM saying fourth is stopping the run so far. That is probably the biggest silver lining so far. I mean, they have been much better against the run this year. That was a big area of concern for them last year. And I would even add to that, like what's noteworthy about that is because they've been playing from behind so much, I think that actually adds to the significance there because if teams are getting leads, you think that they're going to be trying to more, yeah. Right. So yeah, I think that's something I think I talked about that a little bit, or I talked about it when I was a guest on a live stream for some Phillies content creators because someone asked about the run defense and isn't your run defense bad? I'm like, well, it was last year. Right now they've dipped to being fifth, I think, in fifth in yards per game.
You have to imagine because we got ran all over last week, but
and
that's one of the best rushing attacks in the NFL, so that's going to happen.
Yeah, so they were fourth. Now they're allowing 97.4 yards per game. The team ahead of them is 96.6, so they're fifth. But even at getting run all over, it wasn't like they gave up 200 yards. They gave up 139 yards rushing, 61 of that to the quarterback.
Yeah,
right. So they got run on, but 139 yards, especially against a team with a good running quarterback, isn't that. You know what I'm saying? That's not a horrible performance defensively. Quarterbacks, especially when they're doing those kind of scrambles, I almost feel, statistically, I feel like you have to count it this way, but like if a quarterback scrambles on a legitimate pass play and not a design run and then gains yards, I don't put that on the run defense so much. That makes sense. Yeah. That's different. So I think the run defense is looking good, right? So I want to say hey to Jordan P. Just made it MVP. Gino might drop 40 on us. Man, who'd have thunk it?
Our pass defense has been semi decent, I feel like, but yeah, who knows?
Recently, it's been better. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, that Chiefs game probably skewed a lot of metrics and certain, now we had to fight our way out of that, but yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. Cole McFarland, how's the thing that the scorer can show first down after the slide, then they run up to the line, then it changes on Kyler spikes? That was the game, and to me, that's not necessarily on a cliff. Scoreboard showed first as they ran up. Yeah, so that was that last play. Kyler scrambled. Everyone thought it was a first down at first, but then the one of the referees came and said no, he started his slide early, and they moved it back. But I don't want to take them totally off the hook, but you have to remember this is all happening boom, 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 real quick. Everything's going fast. Everyone's getting up. It's so much so that they called in the play to spike it. And the person working the scoreboard, everyone's saying it's first down until the guy moves the ball. And when they move the ball, like Kyler's going up and spiking it. Like it's not like they let it go down to the end of the play clock. So the person working that thought it's first down, and then the ref's moving it, and the time it takes to adjust that, I'm not going to totally take them to task on that.
I think someone said they moved the chains too initially. Like
okay,
the chain gang moved them, and then they put them back after the ref. I don't know. We've heard a lot of different things circling around it. It's just really unfortunate. You kind of want Kyler to dive forward for it. But again, everything's happening so quick. You kind of just do what's muscle memory, and that's sliding, and it's unfortunate. It's
unfortunate that it happened that way. But I also think, like, when you look at it, like, what would they have done much differently? Because what they talked about is if it was third if it had been a first down, they were probably going to run a play and maybe get a couple more yards. But they weren't going to. Cliff even said they weren't going to do anything really risky, so that maybe they run it up the middle, gain 3 more yards. But that field goal,
Yeah.
I don't know that was the game, that play, that thing with the clock. We don't know,
Yeah.
but so yeah. So what are you going to do? Real quick, let's see. I know Tanner's asked a few times, is Marco Wilson good? I think you asked about his grades. We talked about that earlier, so I'll just give the quick version. His grades are bad, but he seems to not be getting totally torched for big plays and touchdowns. So I wouldn't say he's playing well, but they're managing to make it work.
I would say he's playing exactly what you expect a 4th round cornerback to be playing.
Yeah, for sure. On the run defense, Kevin's asking, do you think that the run defense is better this year because they're playing from behind, so they know the other team is running? That might be it. Part of it. I mean, that they also know that the other team is doing that. That might be part of it. They're anticipating it. But I also think Zach Allen is playing so much better. JJ Watt is healthy enough. He's a little banged up. He's on a pitch count, but he's playing. So I think it's also, and then Zaven Collins. Listen, he's still making some mistakes, but the dude is much more physical. He shoots the gaps. I think he's better against the run. So I do think there's something legit about them being better. Now, will they always be top 5 against the run all season? I think they'll regress some, but I do think they're legitimately better than they were last year. What do you think?
I think so too, because other than the Chiefs game, I feel like we're playing from behind, but we're never like totally blown out. So I feel like teams aren't just sitting on the run. I mean, because at that point, I feel like you're definitely dooming yourself if you just sit in the run early. But yeah, no, I totally think you're right. Zach Allen's playing way better. Zaven's playing. I mean, Jordan Hicks, God bless him. He knew where to be, but he can tell his body just didn't quite have the twitchiness, the physicality necessary just to cause chaos that Zaven does. I mean, Zaven's a beast, man. So no, I think we're definitely playing better. Sure, it's some skewed from playing from behind, but I mean, last year we were 32nd in the run defense. No matter how you cut it, we're clearly playing better on the run defense.
Right. Real quick, I forgot to point this out. Robert is working on an article about how much difference having D-Hop on the field makes. I'm using the chance to kind of mention azsportsunderground.com is a website that I started with Kyler Bird. It's the sponsor of TCR Live. It's my own website. I'm sponsoring myself. But Robert's one of our writers. He's doing some great work. Check out his article when that comes out. The link for azsportsunderground.com is down below, so make sure you check that out. I want to say hey to another one of our writers who popped in, Mark Jackson. Thank you for being here. He writes more about like the Coyotes and the Diamondbacks. He's a huge hockey fan. Mark's a great dude, great support of the channel. Thank you for being here, Mark. Appreciate you. So check out his work. Ian Keller. Hey, Joe, do we suck?
No, but we're not great.
Think, Troy? Do we suck?
No, definitely. I mean, definitely not great. This team kind of reminds me, I had this thought earlier. I don't want to make it seem like we've regressed this far, but just watching the games, I'm having similar feelings and memories of the I guess either 2019, like Kyler's rookie year Cardinals. Now, not quite as bad as a mess as that, but like I kind of felt like just these first 5 games. Spent a lot of inconsistency, a lot of, where the offense just seems like it's struggling to move the ball at times, and then there'll be streaks of greatness. Like Kyler, I feel like that was a hallmark of the 2019 year. Just things aren't quite buttoned up. Now our defense is better than it was then, but like right now it just seems like Kyler's playing okay this year. I wouldn't say he's great. I don't think he's playing bad. I think Wolfley had a good point. He's like, Kyler's actually probably the most steady player we have right now, week in and week out. He's been pretty solid, and so I think Kyler's playing great. Again, like the hallmark from the 2020 to 2019 year is D-Hop, and we had like a consistent funnel for our offense. Where 2019 it was Kyler just kind of playing catch with Christian Kirk, Andy Isabella, like Keyshawn Johnson, and granted we have Hollywood Brown, it still kind of feels like that. Like it's just a lot of kind of little chipping away, and like I feel like we're not having a lot of explosive plays right now, which is that's kind of my main frustrating thing is we don't have really, other than Hollywood on like 2 or 3 plays this year, I feel like we don't have a lot of deepness to our passing game, which is frustrating.
No, those are some great points. So couple thoughts on what you said. No, I don't think the Cardinals suck. Right off the bat, there's a couple things going on league wide that I think are worth noting. First of all, I don't remember another year as a fan where at this point there was so much parity. Like it feels like everyone is 2-3 or 3-2. There's a couple really good teams and a couple really bad teams, but everyone it feels like is in that middle. And like I said, as much as our offense is struggling, we're middle of the pack on offense, right? We're not as bad. Like go look at some of the other teams that are struggling and think about how bad it's going for them. And we're actually not that bad of a situation, but we're kind of gonna look at our team and be critical. So I think that's part of it. A lot of people are struggling, a league wide. It's just really, really kind of some bad football being played, to be quite frank. And we're kind of in the middle of that. But like someone, Amit from who is one of the co-hosts of the He's on Fire podcast, another part of the AZ Sports Underground family, tweeted a response to a tweet I sent out, and he's like, "Man, I just don't know what to think about this team anymore. Like, how do you assess this team?" And kind of my response and my take is, this is a high variance team to me. If the offense can get cooking and actually do what they can, I believe they have the talent to do. This can be a top 5 team in terms of how they play. If the offense isn't going, but the defense is playing well, we're kind of a middle of the pack team, which is what we've been for the last 3 or 4 games. The defense has actually played better. The offense is still kind of struggling, so we're middle of the pack. If both of them are struggling, we get week 1. Right?
Yeah.
If the defense is struggling and the offense is playing like it has, we get what we got week 1. So I'm optimistic that the defense has found its kind of sweet spot. I think it's going to keep kind of trending roughly in this middle of the pack, maybe play up to top 10 at points kind of area. And the offense is going to keep getting better. Right. So that's kind of, where I think, so I don't think we suck. I think this team is going to, I'm definitely more optimistic than I was 2 weeks ago. I'll say that.
No, yeah. I mean, I think week over week, the offense is starting to look better for sure. I mean, Eagles is a great defense. And I think once the offense started going last week, like every drive ended in points, maybe barring 1 or 2. I don't know if even we only had the ball like 3 times in the second half. So I think once we got going, it seemed like the Cardinals can do whatever they wanted on offense. Again, minus the stupid Rondale Moore reverses or whatever. So yeah. I'm optimistic too that we don't suck. I think we will be upper tier of like the good team. I mean, not upper tier, but I think we'll be like in the fringe of like the average to good teams to like the great teams. Like I think we'll be fighting for a wild card spot this year, I think. And I think we'll need some things to fall our way to get in the playoffs. But
want to say hey to Lance, who dropped in. Thanks for being here. Great support of the channel, long-time support of the channel. It's because we got rid of Isabella, right? That's why, right? So he's on the Ravens practice squad. So I want to mention one more thing too. There's a couple other trends that have been going on that, and if anyone follows Sharp Football, Warren Sharp stuff, he does some good stuff, does stuff on Twitter, and he produces some reports and stuff that people who follow like in the media, sports media, really like to read. And I got his preview this year and I read it, and he was talking about a couple of those trends. And one we've all seen, like there's less blitzing. People have been talking about that, right? Teams are blitzing less. Cardinals blitzed too much in week 1. We got burnt. We are blitzing a little more judiciously now. But there's another trend that's going on that they talked about that we're seeing. You maybe have heard people talking about this, playing a lot of more too high shells, right? It's sometimes it's the straight up Tampa cover 2, but sometimes it's not the cover 2. Sometimes it's man with the 2, but it's the 2 high safeties, right? And you had like some cover 3s that were really popular, like the Legion of Boom was notorious for playing cover 3, right? 3 deep safeties or 3 deep defensive backs, and the thing about that cover 2 is you can beat it underneath, but it really makes it a little bit tougher to get those deep plays, because that cover 3, you had more defensive backs, but the seams were more exposed with that. And Kyler makes those big plays, right? Those big, deep shots. In fact, that interception he threw this last game was him trying to make one of those deep shots, and really bad, ill-advised
Brutal.
throw. Brutal, right? Brutal. And so, like, the whole thing with the cover 2 or the two deep shell, that kind of defense, is that you have to play more underneath. You have to dink and dunk a little bit more and then take your shots when they're there, but they're not there as often, right? And, so I think, and Jordan's making a good point too, because one of the things about cover 2 is when you're in cover 2, you can run up the middle and kind of expose that. So they talk about, like, when you have that 2 deep safety, the middle is a little more open, and then teams kind of bring one of those safeties into a cover 1 to stop the run, right? And that's kind of what you got to do. So, if they can establish a run a little bit more, maybe they can do that. But they're really trying to hit the kinds of plays that Kyler's used to being able to make, those deep throws, aren't there until you pull teams out of that cover 2 shell. And I think
a lot of that is like the game script, because we're always playing behind. They're sitting in that too, because they know we want to throw. So
because we're not going to run. Yeah, that's a good point. So I think and I've been thinking about this for a while. I hadn't really mentioned it, but I think that's one of the reasons the offense is struggling, because I feel like maybe they haven't adjusted to that transition in the league. They're still trying to hit the kinds of things they were able to hit under a different trend in defense. And now with things moving to that cover 2 or that two shell, I don't know. And that would, to me, actually, that maybe falls more on Cliff, as the play caller. But I just wonder if part of their offensive struggles thus far is they haven't adjusted that enough, at least in the first half. They kind of find their way second half, right? So I don't know. I think that could be, and we'll see, right? I don't know. Do you have thoughts on that?
No, I just heard a thing. I think it was like Ben Solak was saying, like, the NFL swings and pendulums, and now it's like the pendulum's swinging back the other way. Like, guess this is one of the 4-1 teams, one of the best teams apparently in the NFL is the New York Giants. Guess what they do? Run the ball a lot,
right?
And Dable, I'm so sad that he's not our head coach.
But
so I think the pendulum is swinging almost the other way, and I think running. Again, it's all just a game of chess. You run a lot to get people in the box, and they get in the box, you throw deep. Football is a very complicated sport, but also kind of easy.
Yeah, right. Robert says it every week. They need to run, right? Jordan's pointing out Baltimore did it to Cincy on primetime this week, just sat in too high zone looks, and Cincy was forced to run the ball and throw short all game. Yeah, I think
he's been having like troubles offensive this whole year, though. Okay. Unfortunately, I have Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, and Jamar Chase my fantasy team, so getting killed on that. So I know how bad they're doing on offense. And they've been struggling all year, and I think it's a lot of things, but it is some of the balancing the running to the passing game, and sitting in those 2 high shells.
Yeah, and and it's interesting because you talk about how the pendulum shifts, like. I like the term market inefficiencies, right? Coaches, if you're in a league and there's a trend that's just deeply entrenched and everyone's doing this thing, and a certain style of play, everyone's doing that, and the players that fit that are highly coveted and highly paid, and then once in a while, maybe not even once in a while, I think it just happens every so often, is an innovative coach looks for, like, okay, well, we could try to compete with everyone doing that, or we can play something a little bit different. And there's these players that fit this other scheme, and we can get them for cheaper and build a really good roster that does things this way. And they find that market inefficiency and they expose that. And, I think, or like look in the 90s, I think some of the Shanahan zone blocking schemes, and where everyone wanted these big beef offensive linemen, he got the undersized offensive linemen and started doing these runs.
Moving around.
Right. And so I think, where everything's been this deep shot, deep passing, kind of offense, maybe the defenses are adjusting with that cover 2 shell, and the teams that are going to be effective are like the guys are talking about, like Jordan's talking about in the chat, and Robert, like the teams like the Giants and have a smart coach who's going to be like, you know what, this is the shift. Everyone's going to cover 2. We have to run the ball, you know. So maybe the Cardinals need to run the ball more, right? So
and even further on that, the whole Shanahan McVay offense, like they're designed to make your linebackers' life a living hell by targeting him. They have fast, athletic tight ends on slow, big linebackers, and they just pick on them the whole time. And now, what kind of linebackers are we seeing getting drafted? Little smaller, undersized guys that can go sideline to sideline quick. I mean, you see Devin Lloyd and the Eagles, and Joseph or Jeremiah, the guy in the Browns. He's smaller dude, but
Owosu Kamaru or something like that.
Exactly. So we're seeing smaller, quicker line. I mean, that's kind of that was the whole point of Isaiah Simmons, was to get a guy who can be in there but still stick around with the tight ends and play both sides of it. And fortunately, hopefully, we're starting to see the fruits of that labor. But you're totally right.
Yeah, because that's another great point, because everyone shifted to those linebackers who are faster but slighter in build, right? And so then you're going to have teams that are abusing those kind of linebackers running it. So that's a great point. And I think Robert has a point that I agree with too. Also, Murray needs to take advantage of his legs as well. When he gets 8 to 12 run attempts per game, his win record is ridiculous. Like when you look at his first couple years in the league, when things weren't working, he ran it, right? And I know I've said this a lot before, and right now things aren't working. So maybe he should run it a little bit more. And, be smart with the runs, but he needs to run more. But I don't think there's anyone in the league who's smarter with their runs than Kyler in terms of avoiding getting hit. Like no one is as good as he is at knowing when to go out of bounds and avoiding those hits. So I'd like to see that more for sure.
Yeah. Just to say, just 8 to 12 causation or correlate. Was it the correlation does not equal correlation?
Correlation is not causation. Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree. But and that was the most frustrating about the Eagles game, is like you had great success in the Panthers game with Kyler running, and you just refused to do it against maybe they were worried because Hassan Reddick and their the Devin Lloyds, they have faster linebackers, so maybe they can't take advantage of that. I'm not going to get too in depth with that because I don't know, but that's some of the frustrating stuff. Is we need to make people respect his running, but I get frustrated because people are like, see, look at the Eagles' offense. That's how they're supposed to use Kyler. But it's like Jalen Hurts is a lot bigger and stronger than Kyler. He can take the hits. I don't want Kyler out there doing what he's doing, because we know what happens. Like, he will be out for the rest of the year. Like,
Kyler needs to be running into the perimeter, not up the middle. Absolutely. Yes, I agree. They had a nice design run with him in the game. I think later in the game that was pretty good, and it worked really well, right? So, I want to say hey to CB. Take Kelvin Beachum out. Jones at right tackle. We've talked about that a little bit earlier. So and our running backs are good. Based on this conversation and the points you made about those linebackers and this conversation about the cover 2 shell and how, running is how you pull them out of that. Man, I think as cliche as this is, I do think they need to establish the run. I think they need to run the ball more, keep running the ball until the defense starts having to, be honest and bring a safety down, and then let Kyler do what I think he did last year, and Lance saying, I believe in the team, Kyler too. I know Lance is very critical of Kyler, but he still believes in him. He's our own worst enemy though. Kyler's so young, but I do think we'll be running in all cylinders when it matters this year. We've seen it. We've seen last year, we're ready. So man, I would love to see them running it some more after that. And then let Kyler, take advantage when they start getting out of those 2 shells. So
that's the frustrating thing, is apparently like a lot of the advanced fantasy or not fan football nerds will say like Cliff's running game is actually really sophisticated and really well designed. It's just this passing game is kind of like rudimentary, or it's like reverse of what you would think it would be. So I guess it's frustrating to see that. I mean, I guess I should probably have looked up. I don't know what the mix of play calling was, past the runs in this last game, but it's frustrating that we pass more than we run when the runs apparently are strength or like, our cooler stuff is there, and we have good running backs now. So that's frustrating, but I mean, it is what it is.
And Jordan's saying we haven't been able to establish a run because a blink of an eye we're down double digits. Game script allowed defense. Yeah, I would still argue part of the reason we got down is because instead of establishing the run and sustaining drives, we punted or got an interception or turn it over on downs or something, because we got ourselves into second and long and third and long by doing reverses to Rondale Moore, as much as I love Rondale Moore. So I think there's still a little bit of a kind of a feedback loop there, a relationship between those two, where if they were working on establishing the run more and instead of having to try to convert 3rd and 13s, that might kind of fix itself, right? So yeah, I don't know. We've been going an hour and 25 minutes. It's been I've really enjoyed this conversation. I mean, I always do, but I think some of the stuff we're getting into, is really interesting stuff about the shifts and stuff. But we're going to kind of work our way towards wrapping up. Troy, is there anything else you want to mention? You kind of clear the notebook. Anything you didn't get a chance to mention that you want to mention about anything Cardinals related?
I mean, we can kind of talk, maybe we won't go too much. Let's just talk about kind of the winnable games you think going forward, maybe the next 5 or however you want, or maybe 5 or 6 games where you think, or how many games you want to do. But the next winnable games.
Let me tell you what our upcoming games are, and then you can make whatever points you want. Week 6 is at Seattle. Week 7 is versus New Orleans. Week 8 is at Minnesota. Week 9 is versus Seattle. Then in week 10, we have at the Rams, and week 11 versus San Francisco.
In Mexico.
Right.
That's the Mexico game. So I mean, it's going to be, there's some winnable games in that stretch. I think it's also good to note that the Saints home game is the Thursday night game. So that will be a tough go around, I think. So I think Seattle away is going to be interesting because I'm kind of excited to see how this game goes. We actually have good luck against Seattle in Seattle, surprisingly. Hopefully it's the coming into earth of Seattle as we've been hoping for.
Right.
And it'll be the last game without Hop. So then after that, it's kind of, hopefully full steam ahead and to see. I mean, I think, again, people are saying the season's made up of quarters, essentially, now there's 17 games, so give or take a quarter, I think if we go 500 every quarter, I think we'll be in, maybe steal a game here or there, we'll be in a pretty good spot, and where I think we probably should end up being. Again, it's so funny. We're looking at the list now, and it's funny how the tough games have now completely shifted to like maybe not so tough games. Like the Rams away doesn't seem as daunting as it once did.
I mean, every year it does this, right? Like we think that the game, like you look at the schedule, and it happens every year. I mean, some of the teams end up being good, but some teams you thought would be good aren't, right? So for sure, right? Seattle's a tougher game than we thought it would be. Yep. LA, I still am not, as bad as they've been, I am still not gonna.
They always show up for us, which is like frustrating.
Right. So that's still tough. San Francisco's tougher than I thought they'd be. There's I mean, Seattle is interesting. I think absolutely right. Seattle's very interesting. Their offense is, as Jordan says, their offense is booming. Their defense is really bad in terms of giving up points, right? Ian says that's a must win, and for momentum wise, I think it is. They need to really kind of keep things going. Mark Jackson, he thinks we're going to win in Seattle, right? We got a lot of predictions to win. Card should win in Seattle if Cook doesn't call the place. But yeah, I mean, Seattle's a winnable game. New Orleans is a very winnable game, right? Minnesota is the best record here. They're 4-1, but I think they're a little bit of a paper tiger. They week 1 they beat the Packers 23-7, but the Packers have been struggling. Week 2 they lost to the Eagles 24-7, right? So they got kind of blown out by them.
Primetime Kirk.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Week 3 they beat the Lions 28-24, but the Lions, like you talked about earlier, aren't great. Week 4 they beat the Saints 28-25. Saints aren't
in
great.
London. That was a London game too.
Right? And this week they beat the Bears 29-22. I mean, the Bears have, I don't think they're one of the worst teams in the NFL despite having a couple wins. Minnesota's, maybe karma's going to get us because we won that one last year.
That was my reasoning for thinking we weren't going to win. I was like, this is just karma. And I think, well, I guess we'll have a long break because we'll be coming off the Thursday night game. So we'll have 10 days rest going into it. So, and it's in Minnesota. Again, our away form is quite nice.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I'm still trying to figure out. People have asked me in live streams why do I think they're better on the road than at home, and I honestly do not know. I really don't know. I've tried. I sent out a tweet this week about that. The only thing I could find thus far is there is a noteworthy difference in terms of the winning percent of the teams they've played at home and away. It's like a 10% swing, I think. Something like that. So that matters, but I don't think that should be enough that they lose 8 or 9 in a row. Home, right.
So I guess we both agree the Saints game is going to be the first home win. It's going to break the streak.
Hopefully.
We'll be in our black helmets again.
Ooh,
the homecoming of DeAndre Hopkins. It's written in the stars, as it were.
Okay. I'm liking it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I like that though. Well, okay, but New Orleans needs to be the first home win.
That's what I'm saying. Oh,
okay. You think New Orleans? Oh, I thought you said Seattle. I'm sorry. Yes.
I meant the Saints.
Okay. So I think, New Orleans is going to be I hope and pray the first home win we've had in a while. Right. I mean, think about it. If we win at Seattle, we're 3-3. And I think before the season, if you told me we would be 3-3 going into week 7 with Hopkins coming back, with as tough as the schedule has been, having the Chiefs, we thought the Raiders were going to be better than they are. At least most people did. The Rams, right? Playing these teams, the Eagles, who, with the record or with the schedule the Cardinals had, if you told us they'd be 3-3 when Hopkins was coming back, I think a lot of fans would have signed up for that.
Absolutely. I think, unfortunately, we have to look at some context in that, and that 3-3 might be earned for good defensive performances and not great offense performances,
right.
Which, again, the whole point of having Cliff was to overachieve with the offense or have an elite offense and just kind of piece it together and hope Vance will, piece together a decent defense and keep us in games, which he's holding up that end of the bargain. It's Cliff that's not holding up his end of the bargain quite yet, which, again, I believe in Cliff. I think he'll keep it I think he'll figure it out, but hopefully I don't know. There's definitely a little there's some tension, I think, in that team right now.
You're absolutely right, because the reason we're frustrated with it is the way it's looked, right? The way it's happened. Like that Raiders game, we were very lucky to pull off that win, right?
Absolutely.
So absolutely, you're absolutely. That is why, even though we would have signed up for that, we're not happy about it right now, right?
But I think we're seeing things that in this team this year that we did not have last year, and that's we're fighting and playing in every game. Other than the week 1, it has never been blowouts. It's I feel like we're always just fighting back and almost getting there. And I feel like last year, I mean, for the first 10 games, the games were pretty much done and dusted by around halftime. And then we just kind of had to coast it out. Where this year we're having to fight a lot more. I think it's showing a little more personality of our team. Again, these are all kind of this is like a soccer term, the passion merchants will say there's fight in our team. And again, we say that about the Lions, but they're 1-5. I don't think the fans really care about how much passion they got. But I think if we can keep up this kind of mentality, I think it'll serve us better in the end, where we'll be in games, we'll be fine. I mean, that was the big thing a lot of Phillies fans were worried about with the Eagles, is that their games have all been done and dusted by halftime. They just had to sit it out. This was the first Eagles game they had to stay engaged all 4 quarters, and they answered the call. So hopefully
barely
kind of get out barely. Yeah. I mean, it took a backup kicker to Bix.
They only put up 6 points in the second half, was it? I mean,
it took a field goal by a backup kicker, a scoreboard that was wrong. It took a lot of things for them to get that win. Yeah. So again, hopefully it turns around for us, because I think if we start winning games and we keep up this mentality, hopefully we will not see the back half slide.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think this stretch is. I mean, this looking at the calendar, this is the easiest stretch of the season coming up. They need to come out of this with a winning record. If they can't come out of this stretch, if they don't go into to LA for that Rams game in Week 10 with a winning record, it would take a miraculous turnaround for them to make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, I feel like the Chargers game will be tough, but
Mhm.
they have an interesting stretch with Patriots, Broncos, Bucks, Falcons, and Niners. Whereas
Mhm.
Broncos, we don't know. I mean, Broncos could be in shambles by that point. They look terrible as well. Patriots, I'm not sold on. They still look bad. I know they blew out the Lions, but I
Yeah.
don't think the Patriots are very good. Bucks will be tough, obviously, but even then,
Mhm.
they still are like iffy. Like they're just a great defense.
Yeah.
Falcons aren't that good. And then if by the end of the year 49ers already locked up the division, they could be sitting their starters and we could be, fighting for our wild card then. So that's an interesting stretch too.
It
There's
is.
some winnable games.
And I think across the board, this schedule doesn't look as tough as it did before the season, right? Broncos are not the team we thought they'd be at all. Chargers, I think, are going to be fine. Buccaneers are struggling a little bit, but I think by that time, a lot of those teams are going to kind of get things sorted out and be a little bit tougher, but we'll see. So, well, man, it's been a heck of a time. I really have enjoyed this. I've enjoyed everyone in the chat. Thank you all for hanging out. Troy, thank you for hanging out. I need to get your right now, Kyler, his links are below. I'll get your links below. But folks, make sure you follow Troy on Twitter. And go ahead and give a shout out for your for Twin Peaks. Even though
Four Peaks, not Twin Peaks.
Yeah, I've been watching a little too much. What's the director for that? Yeah, a little. Yeah.
Oh, Fincher, right? Isn't that?
No, it's Lynch. The guy. He's a famous director.
It's David Lynch, right?
David Lynch. That's it. Yep. I've got David Lynch on my.
Yeah.
4 Peaks. Give a little shout out. Free advertising.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, 4 Peaks. Obviously, the Arizona's first and best craft brewery, if I may add. 21 and older, drink responsibly. We're Redbird Lager, the official beer of the Cardinals. We have all the games on Sundays. Again, because Arizona sports, the hockey fans. We're right next to ASU hockey and soon to be Coyotes hockey. So come on in, have some beers. It's a good time.
Awesome. Appreciate that. I've got a couple quick things and Robert's remind me the TCR pick'ems results. I got to find that. He posted that for the pick'em here we go. For Gazornik wins week 5 with 11 points. Me and Robert have 10 points. Boy Genius, Mark Jackson, Chase Rock with 8 points. D'Lo with 7 points. So folks who are in that, there's your scoreboard. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at JOKOMO13. Obviously, subscribe if you aren't already subscribed. And thank you all for hanging out with us. Thank you, Troy. It's been a blast. We'll definitely be having you back, obviously. I'm going to also put up my shout out. If you want to help support the channel at another level, there is a thing through YouTube called channel memberships. We've got a couple folks, Mark Jackson and Calvin, who are in here are channel members. And I try to every live stream throw up my kind of shout out to those channel members. So if you want to support the channel next level, no pressure. But if you want to do that helps. Certainly appreciate it. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Troy. And here's our shout outs, and we'll see y'all next time. Peace.
See ya.